Well. Some big news to say the very, very least. Midweek, big news for the West Virginia Mountaineers as the rumors and rumblings finally become true. As the West Virginia Mountaineers announce, Rich Rodriguez announces the homecoming of sorts of Pat White. Pat White will join his former head coach's coaching staff at WVU for year one of Rich Rod's second tenure as head coach. He will be the assistant quarterbacks coach and also special assistant to the head coach. So it'll remain to be seen how much exactly Pat White is involved with those titles, but he is definitely a part of this coaching staff. And we have heard rumblings about this in recent weeks. There have been rumors. I made a joke about it actually on a recent show, and I will tip of the cap to one of the content creators in this space, in Mountaineer Paul, who did confirm this before anybody else earlier in this day and was talking about this more than anybody else the last several weeks. I had a draft ready to go, but wanted to make it official, and he did confirm it. And then the news broke, and it is happening. Mike Asti, WV Sports Now, which means we haven't done this in a while. We've been covering a lot else. We've been very, very busy. But now we are going to offer a live reaction to this big news for the Mountaineers. And as I said, it doesn't get much bigger than this when you are a longtime fan of the Mountaineers. Just for the fact to have Pat White around is a big deal. He was a part of the spring game last year with McAfee there as well. So, Cody, we talked about this briefly. I made a comment that, like, watch them do this. It didn't end up being an offensive coordinator type of thing, which would have been maybe even a bigger deal. And Pat White has been a coach in the pros and college ranks for almost a decade. What's your initial reaction to Pat White joining this coaching staff, the position he will hold? This actually is happening. I mean, the rumors are true. This actually is going down. And what everybody wanted the second Rich Rod was announced to be coming back is now the case. It really was the only disappointing part for a lot of fans of the coaching staff that they didn't bring Pat White back, but now they do.
Yeah. It's neat. He's the best player in program history, so it's cool to get him back. It's a nice story. In terms of actual impact, I mean, he has made up job titles. I mean, really, right?
A lot of people though do on this current
Yeah,
staff. I mean, there's a lot of
but
exaggerated job titles, but 100%, yeah. The special
but
assistant to the head coach feels like
yeah,
you're massaging an ego a little bit there. I was
yeah.
going to get into that because I do think it's great to have him back, but the title he has, I'm a little surprised he agreed to be honest. And I did hear weeks ago that it was maybe a thing, but wasn't going to be a thing because he wanted a better title, and we'll see now,
Yeah.
what really goes on in terms of his coaching.
That's assistant quarterbacks coach when the quarterbacks coach is Rich Rod's son, and special assistant to the head, like those are actual duties. Which that's fine. I am surprised he took those titles instead of like just offensive assistant like some guys do, or something like Noel Devine has with offensive analyst or whatever his title
Yeah,
is.
he's an analyst, so you could argue that's a little lesser of a title.
So it sounds like it's an on-field role. I guess we'll have to wait and see what it actually is. But it's nonetheless it's neat. I'm sure a lot of people probably wanted more, but are happy just to have him anyway.
Yeah, I think it's good to have him anyway, number one. And as somebody who was a student during his heyday and during the success of the program, it is a big deal. And part of me was kind of thinking if they're going to have this miraculous Disney movie turnaround and it's going to be year one and it's going to be great and everything Pat McAfee's talked about, whether year one, year two, or three, if Rich Rod's going to really right the wrong, it would feel a little 1% less than that jubilation if you didn't have Pat White involved when he is working and coaching and you could give him a job. We even talked about on a past show, it was a little weird to bring in Travis Trickett, for example, and not bring in Pat White because we both have said it is crazy for Bruce Irvin and some other just former great players to say, "Oh, I got to get a job because I played there." That's not the same thing as Pat White. For anyone who doesn't know, and I think it's well documented now, he's worked with the Chargers. He worked at multiple colleges. He's done his due diligence to work up the ladder. And I could make an argument, Cody, which is kind of where you're alluding, that it's been a little bit weird with his name so big. Even Holly Rowe even went out there and said, "This is awesome." Like, it is a national name, certainly a bigger name than Travis Trickett, bigger name than Noah Devine. I would even say nationally still, that he has had to work up this ladder and work through so much mud. I mean, he from an intern job to really low level college to now he's the special assistant to the head coach and the assistant quarterbacks coach under Rich Rod's son. And again, not necessarily shade to Rich Rod's son, but the coaching resume is more plentiful on Pat White than it is for Rhett Rodriguez. That is a little odd to me that normally it's one thing that nothing should be handed to those guys, but usually it's an easier trek for somebody with that name in coaching to get better job titles. So that is a little surprising. It looks like he swallowed an ego, his ego a little bit for that job title. And can you imagine the pressure too on Rhett? You're sitting there, and if you imagine disagreeing with Pat White, you're technically above him, but he's, arguably the best quarterback in program history. People can argue Major Harris or whatever, but like imagine that scenario. But he's there. Yeah. You mentioned he's going to have an on the field coaching role. I definitely think it's going to be a lot more involved in practice than obviously in actual games, which makes sense. A lot of that remains to be seen because assistant quarterbacks coach, a lot of programs don't even have that. I mean, it's not even a thing that is really, really necessary, and we got to see what Rhett can really do as a coach. But what do you expect and what do you want to see from him in terms of his actual involvement? Because he's back and that's good.
Yeah.
He has been a pro coach. He's willing to do the day-to-day job, but it's not like he's there as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah. I don't know. I think you said it right with the practice stuff. I'm sure, a lot of programs fell in love during COVID with doing the split practices where the young players get a lot of time. And with the new rule that you can have as many coaches as you want, I'm sure that's an aspect of it is, every quarterback's going to get some reps because they have, 2 quarterbacks coaches now. They have the staff where it's not overwhelming. Certainly that would be a positive. And I give Pat a lot of credit. Like you said, it's not like he was like some of these guys who was like, "Hey, I want a job, Rich. Hey, bring me in, Rich." No, I mean, Pat's first job was Alcorn State,
right?
And then he went to South Florida, and then he went to Alabama State. Like he didn't. It hasn't been the red carpet for him coaching wise. Give him credit for that. It is at the end of the day about who you know, and he knows Rich Rod, and that got him this job certainly. And same with Noel Devine.
I would have thought though, he would know more people to get better roles over the last decade. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
I'm never going to say like, "Hey, don't go cut your teeth at Alcorn State." That's why I keep. Good for him. I'm sure he could have called. Yeah. He could have called Rich Rod up and been a special assistant at Jack State. I'm sure.
I would imagine, right? Yeah,
he didn't. I keep saying I give him a lot of credit for that. Like, go. You want to be a coach? Go actually coach. Find a place that'll hire you and do it. And that's, if the place that'll hire you is your alma mater and it's a Power 4 school, all the credit in the world, but you're not going to have an actual job, right? You're going to be an offensive analyst.
Yeah, but I mean, again, to that end, and in a similar type of road, and obviously doesn't carry the name cachet, but Blaine Stewart, who obviously has a legacy connection as well, he worked from being an intern to staying with the Steelers for years and years. But then, Cody, this is kind of where I'm going with this. Then he got a legit title as tight ends coach. And we even talked about in the past when he was moved to inside receivers coach that maybe that's a little bit of an ego hitting a step down for him in terms of at least title that a casual fan would know, but it's still an integral, part of the team, but he's no longer running a room. That's Ryan Garrett. So he's now technically below somebody else. They do have a wide receivers coach there, but his first title in major college football at a power forward. Neil Brown giving it to him is not Rich Rod, but it was tight ends coach. That's a better journey than Pat White's, and it didn't even take him as long to get it. So you do wonder. I mean, if what those conversations really were like, and if Pat White had a chance to have a better job either under Neil Brown or somewhere else, or at Jack State under Rich Rod, or whatever the case may be. He did have that period with the Chargers as well, kind of doing what Blaine Stewart did, but you could argue Blaine was even more involved. Maybe I saw him a lot more involved covering the Steelers, but still looked like his role was more involved than what Pat White was doing with the Chargers. I'm just a little surprised. I did not expect him to be the offensive coordinator in all seriousness, because that, in all reality, that's Rich Rod anyway. That seems like that would arguably, if that was the case, I would argue, is he really ready? That maybe is too much of a role. You want to have a legit guy in there, and it's Rich Rod's offense, so it basically is de facto him. And they got Zach Alley to run the defense as a legit D coordinator. Those are big jobs you can't really mess around with. That can't be just a reunion job. But assistant QB coach, it does feel like that he's put in enough work over the years, especially with dual threats that you're bringing in, especially with Jalen Henderson, who very much compares to him, but maybe a bigger body. Why not just make him the quarterback's coach? I mean, that's kind of what that's kind of what that screams like. That's where I'm going with this. Again, I get you're helping your son. Your son did play Power 4 football. Your son maybe makes more sense than other programs in the country and their QB coach. That is how a lot of coaches start. Again, Travis Trickett has had, his road to get where he is, and he didn't get handed offensive coordinator either. So it's not like you did that for him and not Pat White, but it does feel a little odd again that that Pat White has the assistant QB title, and maybe that'll be an easier transition if you do have to let your son go because the QB position doesn't work well. Then you can have Pat White ascend. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here. If you are around, and I do see some of you watching along, it's obviously been big news of the day, middle of the week, kind of a middle of the week news dump that's been under the radar a little bit in recent weeks, despite in rumors. And again, Mountaineer Paul did have it more out there than anybody, but it becomes official here on randomly a Wednesday in February once they finally got done with announcements here. So feel free to chat along. Otherwise, we'll keep at it here for a little bit longer. In addition to now coming back and whatever this role materializes, the other debate that still now has been brought up a little bit again, it almost seemingly will never die, and Pat McAfee is a big proponent of it, so we'll see how much steam it gets throughout the season. I already know the answer from the program, but I do wonder if there's so much peer pressure now they're forced into it and adjusting their rules. Do you believe and do you think that Pat White now being fully back with the program will and should lead to his number being retired, to even the program fighting for him for the College Football Hall of Fame? Because they've not really done that either, and they did just get Steve Slayton in. That's a hard journey, and to get in, you need somebody to fight for you. They've not done that for Pat White. They did not feel he met the qualifications to them to fight for somebody, and he does not meet the qualifications officially to get a number retired or to do anything beyond just the WVU Sports Hall of Fame. They're very close to the vest in that. They really do not want to change those rules. And I have flat out heard from people within the program, I get he's, arguably the GOAT, but if we bend the rules for him, when does that stop? And who do we not bend the rules for? Steve Slayton, they got in the College Football Hall of Fame, but he doesn't have a jersey retired. Where are you on that debate that I just think we both know that's going to be a debate now throughout the entire season, especially with Pat White standing around, and McAfee's likely going to be bringing this up immediately upon talking about the news on his show? Do they get peer pressured into it, and should they adjust?
Yeah. I've held this position for a long time. When you have the kind of athlete that you just know it's going to happen, I've never understood dragging your feet for it. And I get the Pro Hall of Fames. They want to get, they have guys be retired for 5 years. Like Pat White's number is going to get retired, right?
Do you believe that though? Because it's beyond
it
it's not
would-
just dragging your feet. I've heard flat from the program that they want you to be a consensus All-American. That's where I was going with Slayton. Slayton is a consensus
Yeah.
All-American, which is why they fought for him. And Pat White was in an era with Matt Leinart and all those guys, and he did everything under the sun. He did not get consensus All-American.
I mean, it's just
They would be bending the rules for him.
if that's it, then the university should just come out and say publicly, which it would be a shitty public statement to make, but come out and say, no, we're not going to retire his number. He's great. We love him.
Horrible public. What
We're
a
not gonna
statement they
retire
would be
number.
releasing.
But to me,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it would be ridiculous not to.
Okay.
For a player of his magnitude, and like I said, I don't understand dragging your feet about it. And look, if they never do it, then I don't know why string the fan base along for decades. Just come out and say, hey, we're not going to retire his number. We'll name the concourse after him, or something like that. Right. But
Cody, you want to talk dragging your feet? Was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago when Major Harris' number went up there? I mean, the man played in the late '80s. Like, what are we talking about here? Dragging your feet? That took decades.
That's
That took
that's
decades
what
to
I'm
get up there. So we're not even close to that journey.
What really led me to this opinion was it 4 years ago? Hot Rod Hundley got his name put up.
That's what I mean. There's been a lot of dragging your feet. That's what I'm talking about. Jerry West, as much as he's been up there for a while, at least in basketball, his ceremony that Caridi emceed and people show clips of, that was in the late 90s. Jerry West had already retired as a player, again, 4 decades, had already been part of building teams. So dragging feet has been the theme. And you could actually argue, when you look at that trajectory, this would still be very recent for Pat White, based on how long those players had to wait.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I got, when we had that press conference with Hot Rod Hundley, I'm looking at it, I'm like, why did this take so long? And obviously I wasn't alive then, but like, he's an old man. Like, what he had. He drafted Michael Jordan. It's like
Don Nalen. Do you think that was late? I mean,
of course it was.
That's what I mean. Like, he's a coach, not a player. There's not a number, but like his name could have went up there. Yeah, 100%.
Of course. That's where I've formed this opinion, and a lot of pro teams do it. Like Dwayne Wade with the Heat, he already has a statue. Dirk already has a statue.
Yeah, some are very quick. Yeah.
So that's like, in my mind, like, if and obviously I don't have the university's thinking on this, but if we're sitting here and we're like, obviously Pat White is one of the best ever, he's in our Hall of Fame, it would be very meaningful to retire his number. What's the difference waiting 10 more years? Like, and if you want to say, hey, wait for him to finish his pro career, all right, that's over. Like, I understand if you want to do that. But I don't know. It's a silly argument to me. And it's not a stretch. If it's Pat White, right?
I hear you. I hear you. And no, I think they absolutely should do it as well. But to make this clear, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about this situation.
Yeah.
While with everybody else that you mentioned, they did drag their feet when they clearly were qualified. They should have been in, etc. They drag their feet, and now they're in and they're being honored. And Jerry West numbers retired throughout the whole athletic program for crying out loud, which is very, very deserved. But Pat White, technically speaking, has not qualified. That's all I'm saying. That there is a difference with him, and I do think it's dumb. I've told them, I'm not going to out the people, but it's probably obvious, and I've told them to their face. I think it's ridiculous, but I have had it come back to me to my face, where people have said within the program, multiple people who are in these meetings, that's why it's not been done. It's not about dragging feet. It is, he did not accomplish consensus All-American. I don't even think Pat McAfee understands that, and there are people within the program that think he does not get it. It is not just that they're dragging feet, or that they think he's not one of the greatest Mountaineers of all time, arguably even the best, but that is something they are very strict on. And I honestly think if Steve Slayton did not get consensus All-American, they wouldn't have fought for him, and he wouldn't be in the situation either. It's not just churning yards as a great running back. Consensus All-American is part of it. And there are a lot of programs, Cody. This is one of my pet peeves with the WVU football program. I honestly think part of the reason why and we heard Neil Brown complain about this a lot last year. I think part of the reason why that they feel like they're underrated historically and disrespected historically, not even just current, is because they don't do enough to promote what they did historically.
Yeah.
I do think it's a little bit on the program. I mean, not only just the players, but I think it's a little bit on the program. They have nothing anywhere in the stadium inside the facility at 15 conference titles all over the place. That's top 25 all time. Nothing in the stadium says how many conference titles the program is winning. I know there are people within the program that don't even want to celebrate half of them because they were so many decades ago and was before the Big East. That's not how college football works. Like, if you look at how programs celebrate their history, they churn way back. Ole Miss is talking about 6 conference titles on their Twitter bio from the 60s. Now, I agree that that's a little bit ridiculous, but if you're going to sit out there and say, I'm a program that's been around for 100 plus years, 120, 30, 150 plus years in some cases, the whole history gets encompassed. The whole thing, not just recent memory or what you think is power football or your opinion. I do think the whole thing should be put out there. I have a draft ready to go if we ever get into this debate again, and I still stand firm on this. I think they should claim 1922. There are 6 programs that claim it. Some of them programs have a loss those years. That was well before the AP. There's no way to officially say anybody's a national champ that year. They really. But if we're going to get in the business of claiming titles, and Pitt claims 9 that none of them really are legitimate besides 1976. A lot of them are tainted. I mean, if you look at WVU, they have, just going to Pitt again, they have more bowl wins, more bowl appearances, and more overall wins than Pitt historically. Do you think a casual fan would guess that? Probably not, because of all the great players they had, and they did have many, many great players, and because they claim so many national titles. Again, 8 of the 9 are not really legitimate. And if you look in the NCAA's listing of what they legitimize, they only legitimize about 4 or 5 of Pitt's 9, but that doesn't stop Pitt from claiming 9 of them. Obviously there's not 9 to claim for the Mountaineers, even if they want to get chintzy, but there's one, at least. There's one there. They were 10-0 in a year that an 8-1 team's claiming a title. And you're telling me the strength of schedule is not legit? How can we fairly evaluate strength of schedule from 1922? And why are you the program that doesn't want to give it? Well, I mean, what are we doing? So you get to that scenario. And Cody, even on the wall, do you know the wall when we're walking from where we do interviews from the facility back to the press box? There's a wall there that talks about the top seasons in program history. It says undefeated and untied the 88 and 93 seasons. I swear on my life when I was a student that just said undefeated. People started bringing up that they were undefeated in 1922, and they added untied there to kind of ding that away and take away that debate. Why are we doing that? I don't get that. So there are things the program does that I think gets them into that mess, and this is part of it by not retiring, not honoring Pat White, and taking so long to honor your legends. I even remember seeing a TikTok video about a year ago. Some random fan was randomly doing a TikTok video there. He somehow broke into the stadium and was looking around saying, why are all the players that I remember when I was growing up, none of them are here? Like, they were pretty good for a while. None of this is acknowledged.
Yeah. And Mike, to that end, West Virginia has the most popular highlight tape ever with Tavon Austin, the one. Right? Like, that's the highlight tape anybody ever talks about.
Yeah. Still, to this day, recruits literally put his picture up there when they get an offer.
And everybody talks about it. Like, that's the college football highlight tape. Like, the best one ever.
100%. Yeah.
Tavon is almost nowhere when you walk around Mile and Pushkar. Right? Like, and it's kind of like, in 5 more years, are we going to be having that discussion? Like, does Tavon's number go up there? I don't know. He was a consensus All-American, right? All-purpose.
I do know that he is somebody that the program is considering fighting for, by the way. I will say that. So that is, I would actually expect him, to be honest with you. I think he has a better chance to College Football Hall of Fame than Pat White, as insane as that sounds. Because if the program does not fight for you, it's not going to happen. That was years to fight for Steve Slayton.
And it's, I don't know. You have like a golden goose. Why is like Tavon Austin hype not beat to death inside the stadium? You know what I mean?
You could do a lot more. 100%. Yeah.
And I appreciate the history, right? Like I appreciate seeing the black and white photos up and all that. Nobody knows who these guys are, right?
I mean, around the
Nobody.
concourse, you do have black and whites, but it could do more.
But like, I mean, you mentioned it. Like Pitt's got all their greats. Everybody knows their names. Everybody remember Darrell Revis and Larry Fitzgerald and all that. Like, hey, slap Gino's face up some more. Slap Tavon up.
And,
West
and
Virginia's
what's
got
really
guys.
annoying is inside the facility, there's a lot more of this. When you're going to
Yes,
the
there is.
bathroom in the
There
facility, there's
is.
a big
Yes.
thing of Gino there. Like, there's a lot more of this in the facility. Fans are not generally there, obviously, but the media sees a lot more of this than a regular fan would going to the stadium, or even if you take an aerial shot and put it nationally, and even going to the consensus All-American thing, Cody, that is what West Virginia clings to. That is not what every program in the country clings to. Now, a lot of programs, whether you go to their team page, even what freaking Wikipedia puts up, even though that's obviously not, legit or sanctioned, or even what the program puts out there, a lot of the programs just say, here are our All-Americans.
Yeah.
And that's what they promote. Because you could argue the list and the outlets that distinguish an All-American, that are deemed official or not official and are part of the consensus thing, that's changed over the years. There's a whole debate on whether PFF should be there now, and I know the program's part of that debate. And Zach Frazier didn't even get consensus All-American, as insane as that sounds, in his last season, because one outlet didn't vote for him. Milam did get on there. When you're thinking about it, Milam, is his legacy better than Zach Frazier's? Like, are you gonna do it for Milam and not Zach Frazier? Is that going to be a scenario that you're going to get into in 20 years? That seems a little bit ridiculous when we're both living in it. But they have 14 consensus All-Americans. If they went to just All-Americans, like other programs, like Pitt and other programs, just they try to promote the biggest number. That's I guess my biggest pet peeve here. There are a lot of programs that try to promote the biggest number for whatever they can get from their program. Some of it does look a little crappy. I can write a whole book on mythical championships, and the whole claim business is all BS, and it's not just Pitt. Notre Dame and Alabama they share a claim for national title when they played each other in a bowl game. Obviously, one had to beat the other, and how can you share it? I mean, that 1973, look it up. They played each other in a bowl game, and they're sharing a national title. It's crazy on what's gone on throughout history, and even Oregon could claim last year if they really want to because of a selector, even though they won't choose to do that. But a lot of programs just go to the biggest number, and West Virginia does not go to the biggest number. They do not. They do not go to the biggest number. They do not want to claim things. When I was a student, I will tell you factually, when I was a student, the basketball program did not claim 1942 as the national title. That was within the last 5 years. And I know that was not put out there in a press release. They just changed the banner and put a little trophy up in the facility because they didn't think it was worthy of full-on promotion. Then what are you doing by claiming it? Like that's just like the whole this is the whole rant that I could go further into here, but I guess I'll answer it this way. I really wonder what happens with this Pat White scenario, especially with him there, as a real test to the program. Because I know the opinions of the program when it comes to Pat White, and if he deserves his number to be retired, and if they will fight for him for the College Football Hall of Fame. I know the opinions. Maybe not everybody at the program, but some prominent people there. And it hasn't happened yet, and I know the consensus All-American thing has been brought up repeatedly. So if that's the case and he ends up getting his number retired and it ends up happening for him, then I do honestly believe they're caving off to peer pressure. And we'll see how loud that gets throughout the entire season. And McAfee's probably talking about it every single week. But it'll be very interesting because I would not be shocked if they stick to their guns, Cody. Like, do you forget what our opinions are? Do you think the peer pressure of, especially having him be there, will get into their mind and adjust this, or they will stick to their guns, and you may even at one point in a couple of years get a press release that'll just piss everybody off? I mean, I don't think that'll happen, but like, do you think they will be peer pressured and almost bullied into this?
I think Ren Baker's an extremely savvy athletic director.
Right.
And Andrew Luck was good, and Shane Lyons was good. They were very much more traditional than Ren has been.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
They were much more traditional than Ren has been.
Right.
If Ren is here for the long haul, which there's no reason to think he won't be, I could see it happening. You asked me last year if Rich Rod would ever coach at West Virginia. I would have told you hell no. So
Right.
things change. And also,
Yeah. Do you think Oliver
I,
Luck would have made that move? He might have been worried
right,
about
and
PR and the history and all that. Yeah, maybe.
and I don't
Maybe
know
he could.
I don't know how big of an effect this will have. Is there is going to be a new university president this year or this summer?
Sure. Sure.
I
They
assume
are
they're going to
gonna
be. I
they're gonna
assume they're going to
renovate
be
the stadium in the
younger.
press box. By the way,
I assume they're going to be younger than Gordon Gee.
I would
So
assume that. I would assume that. Yes.
if you get a more, a younger, more forward-thinking university president, you have a more modern athletic director. If you're going to renovate the stadium anyway, they're going to add luxury boxes. Ren has talked about that every time we talk to him. He talks about the luxury boxes.
100%.
Like things are going to change.
I know they want a new
and
press box. I know Ren
I
wants a
don't-
new press box.
I just don't think there's a person, any self-identifying West Virginia fan is not going to say, you're going to retire Pat White's number, but he wasn't a consensus All-American, right? Like, no, it would.
Right.
It's just a big plus. And the other thing is, like I said earlier, it's not a stretch. Like the guy, it's earned. He deserves it.
Yeah. I mean,
And it's
that's
like-
the thing. You could argue him as the GOAT even over Major Harris, even
Yeah.
if you don't worry about consensus All-American. And I also said this directly when that was told to me about if we bended for him, we got to bend it for everybody else. There is not, there is not a WVU alum. There is not a WVU football great. There is not a Hall of Famer. There is not a fan. There is not anybody local or nationally that would bat an eye if tomorrow you announce you are bending you could even put in the press release, we are bending the rules, and everyone would be like, all right, fine. If you're going to bend the rules for one person, you're bending it for him. I even said you could bend the rules this one time and then stick to the rules the rest of the time, because I don't think anybody would care. Steve Slayton himself would not care, and he got since All-American and deserved it too, but he thinks Pat White should have his number retired. I know that to be true. Nobody would care, and I am sure that if there's any former alum that would then call the program and say, you bended it for him, you need to bend it for me, where are you fighting for me? I would feel more than comfortable talking to that person and being like, you got to be kidding me. Because no matter who they are, they're not on the level of Pat White, and Major Harris is already up there. So any older fan that wants to say it's Major Harris already up there. He already got his. It's time for Pat White at this point. I think if you're going to bend the rules, this is when to bend the rules. And having him back there as a coach on the staff, this would be the time then to do it. But I never will take credit away from stubbornness either.
It's very funny the hand wringing is about bending the rule. If we have to bend the rules for Pat White, the best player and I keep saying that's not a debate for me. I think Pat White's the best to ever play here.
I do as well. Yeah.
Full respect to Major Harris. If we bend it's like saying if we bend the rules for LeBron James, we have to bend them for everybody. No, you don't. He's LeBron James. It's Pat White. Like I don't understand. I've never understood.
No, I hear you.
I think it's silly.
I hear you.
But like you and I keep saying, there's not a soul. There's not a soul.
I don't think there's anybody who'd bring it up. No.
Well, he didn't earn that. Right? Like
that would be. I mean,
if they it's so I don't know.
That would be. I mean, I can read you the stats and obviously the accolades and a ton of graphic we put out there. It's in all the articles. Everyone knows all of it. You don't even need to. It's exact. You know what it is? I don't know if you know this story, but I even had him tell me this in person, but it's actually a famous story, that when John Elway was up for candidacy for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and as you know, that usually the longest tenured writer or somebody that person selects who's in media has to, whether it be John Elway, whether it be Pat White in college football, or whoever it is for any of these Hall of Fames, somebody has to go in the meeting and say this is why they should get in. Even if it sounds crazy because they're slam dunk, they got to have it. Sidney Crosby's going to have it for hockey, when obviously that's, a guarantee situation. LeBron's going to have somebody do it for him, even though obviously it's a guarantee situation. Well, Woody Page went up there, and they give you, I believe you get like 10 minutes. Like you can just go on and on without an interruption. It's just your stage. Woody Page literally got up there and said, John Elway. and then sat down.
Yeah.
And it literally is the shortest promotion of anybody for any Hall of Fame ever, unless you get a name shorter. He's always going to have that. That's almost the situation you're in when it comes to not only West Virginia and retiring a number, but even the College Football Hall of Fame. All Mike Montour or anyone should have to do in the meeting is, Pat White, I'm done. Like, they shouldn't have to be, you should not have to read the accolades. They're known. They're known. All the generations respect them. They're there. This shouldn't have to be a thing, but it is. But I just need to caution the fans that it is not just about dragging the feet like with the other players to just, okay, hurry up yourself. They would have to technically bend their rules that they do not want to do. So I need everyone to prepare themselves to be irate about this if this has not happened by this point next year, if you don't have any press release. But I do think your point about Ren Baker is maybe the best thing for this argument, even more than McAfee bringing it up. Ren Baker is an outsider. He's not in the old, he's not in the good old boys club. He's a very modern thinking person. He may even have in his brain, if I do this, is going to catch fire on social media. The national media is going to be all over it, and it will help us recruiting and get us money. That might even be the only reason he wants to do it, to be honest. Obviously, he respects Pat White. But even if that might even be in his brain, that would get you a lot of national recognition. And I don't think you'd have to open it up and have 45 people on the wall. I do not. I mean, that is if that is a fear, I do not think that is the case. I know that is what some do believe, but I do think you can do it for Pat White and just have him be a special case. And but for anyone to get this out again, it's not about that he didn't win a national title. It's not about 13-9 happened. It's not about that he didn't win a Heisman when he was, people thought he was going to be in the running and that he didn't get to New York and all. It's not about any of that. The contender All-American thing is the thing. That is the thing. That is in their rules. They have meetings about this. That is the issue. And that's the one thing that cannot be changed. You can't go get one retroactively. You can't claim one that you didn't have 20 years ago, even though you can claim everything else in college football history. So they would have to bend the rules, but if you're going to bend it for anybody, it's to bend it for him. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, WVU Sports Now. We're reacting to the Pat White news. He is back. Unlike the past live chats, not much action here, but I do want to just quickly bring up, I don't know if you saw the news of a little bit of news about Title IX that I think is a very underrated, very, very, very big deal. Because based on what President Biden tried to slide in there, that would have made it very difficult. I don't want to make this a political thing, but that would have made it very difficult for a lot of programs, not even just West Virginia, to operate. And I get the thinking of equality, but if whatever you put out there in rev share, because now it can be out there in Front Street and it's not just necessarily companies, the schools can do it. Whatever you would have put out there prior to this now change for football, you'd have to somehow trickle it down to women's basketball or to women's soccer or all across the sports. And there just wouldn't be enough to do that. I mean, that would just be almost impossible and crippling to most programs in the country, if not all. Now, you can put most in football and men's basketball and just, kind of let the rest be what they are now, and just, it wouldn't be fair. And, maybe there's a debate to have this not be a better situation. What are your thoughts? Do you like this reversion, or do you think it kind of was fairing it up in terms of equality, at least, than what Biden was trying to do? It certainly makes life easier for the program, but there are, I guess, arguments against this, that maybe it is unfair to other sports because maybe there are some programs that are not going to trickle anything down.
Yeah. The Title IX protections by and large are so crucially important, because left to their own devices, I mean, let's be honest, schools are not going to fund women's sports and they're not going to fund the Olympic sports. And I think what we're going to see is there's going to be some schools, Oklahoma softball, LSU women's basketball, stuff like that their schools are going to elect to fund those programs. And I think the parity in, the quote unquote non-revenue sports, which, it's not great, right? Like, the same handful of schools are always the best.
A little bit more open now, though. We talked about that even women's basketball. More
But,
open now, even last year, this year onward, than it's been for
but
30
I
years.
do think it's going to be very direct, more so than football or basketball. It's going to be very direct. X school spent X amount of money on this sport, and they win the most, right? I think it's simple as that. I don't think there's a lot of schools that aren't going to trickle, especially smaller G5 schools. Like if they get a bunch of football money, if they get a bunch of men's basketball money, that ain't going nowhere else. Like it's not. And
and the idea is trickle down economics, but it may not everyone trickles it down.
But it's in like West Virginia, like I'm sure men's soccer will get something. I'm sure baseball will get something. I'm sure women's basketball will get something. There's programs that aren't. I mean, that just aren't. And every school has that.
WVU might spread it out more than others, though. I mean, that's 4 or 5 programs they're going to spread it out to.
Like the rowing team's not going to get any money.
Rowing, tennis,
gymnastics. It's just not. And so that's where my concern would be is if there's just I don't know. It's the schools that want to fund those sports. Like I said, Alabama or Oklahoma softball. I'm sure. Like on one hand, I'm like, hey, more power to you. If you want to spend money on it, you should be the best, right? You should beat everybody that doesn't want to spend money. But at the same time, I think it does suck. I think if there was a way to do it where you could mandate that it is spread out, I think there's a lot of programs and a lot of schools that you give them a little bit of money and they could be really, really well run. Not just on the women's side, like baseball, like Pitt baseball is terrible. I mean, I'm sure you give them a little bit of money, they could have a decent program. They've got a great
and
facility.
it shouldn't be because JJ Weatherholt went to West Virginia. He's in he was in the Pittsburgh area. Yeah, I mean, they could have had options, but
that's where I get sad about it. Is like, not sad, I guess, but like, I do think there's opportunity.
You're gonna cry on your pillow.
Yeah, right. I do think there's opportunity to have some sports flourish. Volleyball's exploded recently, last 2 years, really. Women's basketball has exploded. Like, I think there's opportunity for that. I think, college wrestling is highly entertaining. You never see it.
I mean, look at Penn State wrestling and what they do. Yeah. And I'll tell you the numbers from Nittany Sports Now. Wrestling is king, really. That really does a lot for that athletic program. And going to Pitt again, Pitt volleyball went from being nothing to being elite. And that gets into a whole nother mess, though, because I know that was almost part of what got Heather Lyke fired, because the Victory Heights project, the volleyball program ended up being too good for it. They don't want to share because now they're the top dog of the Olympic sports. So that gets into a whole nother mess. But that's an example of you can't, if you're going to invest and you get really, really good and become elite, they pack that house for Pitt friggin' volleyball. So that's because they're elite. Let's face it. If they were trash, nobody would be going there.
Yeah,
maybe
that's what I mean.
That's
just what I mean by like opportunity. Like, there's so many there's so many sports at schools that are just complete write-offs. Like there are some sports that are just, this is the Title IX requirement, so it's a sport. Rowing at West Virginia, I don't think they use a single scholarship for that. But it's here. They have a rowing team, if you didn't know. But it's just, that's at every school across the country. And there's, I think also because I covered high school sports, I see all the kids that don't go to top Division I's and all the sports that don't make money, and I see those kids. I'm like, and I get the feeling like these kids, they deserve to go somewhere, if it's lower level or Division II or whatever, and have a shot and have decent facilities and that kind of stuff. And like I said, like every school is going to fund football and basketball, men's basketball, and everything else will get scraps. And that's just kind of, but that's just the reality. I mean, that's just what it is. That's
I mean, I hear you. What I was going to bring up as a devil's advocate point, because I do agree that trickle down economics may not work if you don't trickle it down, and some schools are going to trickle it down more than others, and it does suck for the athletes of the non-revenue sports, or lower level athletes. I get it, but in this era of college football in particular, especially at West Virginia, but certainly a lot of programs in the country, because as we know, most programs in the country are in the red, athletic wise. A lot of them are.
Yeah.
And not everyone's Ohio State that's going to spend $20 million on a roster. So with all of that said, West Virginia and Ren Baker believes they can compete nationally because of this new era of rev share, not just off the NIL era, where it was just really even dirtier than it potentially is going to be now, where they're trying to spread out the love a little bit. So the counter would be, if you did not do something like this, and you have to say you have to spend hypothetically $10 million in football to compete for a national title. You don't have to. Everyone doesn't have to do the Ohio State thing, but say you have to get to 10. West Virginia was at 3.5. The reporting, the sourcing that I could tell you, belief anywhere from 6 to 9, which is still under 10, maybe closer to 6, and more realistic situations there on what could maybe be put out. Certainly, we've already seen them just on the staff alone get over 5. Just the staff. That's not the football team, but just spending more on the staff. Neil Brown only got 3.5 on his staff, and the players then, he basically said that the NIL was 3.5 at that time. Should be more now. There's more money coming in now. But say the bar is 10, just throwing out a number. If you have to get to a much higher bar to compete at a national level in football and you want to be there, and then you have a rule based on what it was just briefly there with Title IX, with what Biden was trying to do, you'd have to legally spread out so much love that you'd either go broke or you wouldn't be able to do the 10. You'd be like, okay, I can only go 5 now in football because I got to spread it out so much and I only have so much money. If you got to get to it, if you want to win a national title in football and you got to spread it out and you don't get to do the trickle down thing, I don't know how you would avoid programs going broke, I guess would be the other issue. I think in that scenario, what you're saying, it would be more fair. I do think that would be more fair. But I guess the answer to me is the old system was more fair for everybody. But this new situation now on what Trump is trying to do, to be honest, is better for West Virginia football and men's basketball to actually win a title.
Yeah.
To be honest. And that is what fans care more about. And I know from even being a student, when the football program is flourishing, everything there at the school, whether it should go directly to sports and shouldn't be everything. I mean, they're building up academic buildings and money that should only go to sports. Money is thrown around. And when football is great and men's basketball is great, those are the peak years with enrollment. Those are the peak years with finances. Those are the peak years of interest. The women's soccer program vying for a national title, or when the men's soccer program was in the College Cup, they didn't resurrect buildings that the football program was doing. So if you did go by the old thing, I don't know how you wouldn't just go broke athletically.
Yeah, and that's let's get out there. The NIL model was not sustainable. Anything's better. Anything's better than that.
Yeah,
but yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, it's completely fair that football, men's basketball get all the money. They make all the money.
they generate more. Yeah, right.
But it is, and that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what people care about, and that's why I brought up. Like, I keep bringing up Oklahoma softball. That's a program that is huge down there in Penn State wrestling. That's a program that's huge, so they're going to get the money, or some money. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, in that's what I kind of meant. Like, left to their own devices, everybody's going to fund football. That's just the reality of what it is. I do, I just think there is the worry that that I don't know. I don't
know how to find a compromise between.
Yeah,
I don't know. Honestly,
I
do not know a compromise between what Biden was doing and what Trump wants to do. I don't see a middle ground there. They're two. Now, this is obviously how politics works and how it's been, but they're so far away from each other. And even in this conversation, I don't see a middle ground. Like, is there a middle ground that you think exists if we all with a sound mind can try to do a middle ground? I honestly don't even. I'd love middle grounds in this world, and we don't do enough of them. I don't see what it is here. I don't see one.
Well, I'm one of these people. I think we should kind of scrap the NCAA and start over.
Oh, yes. They're not even really in charge in the first place, but yes.
So, I think a lot of things we're doing now, I say we, like you and I, a lot of things that are being done now.
Yeah.
A lot of it is
I have no say in any of this. But
it's rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, right? Because like I said, the NIL stuff didn't work. It wasn't going to work. It was, all right. It was also terrible. um, I'm sure this new rev share is going to be all right for a year or two, and then the cracks are going to show and stuff. Just like NIL. NIL was awesome that first year, right? And then
Well,
you get
because it
this stuff.
sounded. Yeah, I mean, to
Yeah,
go to your
yeah,
point of
and then
fairness, it sounded fair. Like
yeah,
if everyone's
but
going
it's
to make
all
billions of dollars, you got to give something to the kids, especially if you're buying their jersey. Why can't they get a
yeah,
piece of their jersey? It's not like it was socialism where everyone got $300 a week. They were getting their market value. If you're Pat White, for example, you're going to get more than the last player on the roster because you deserve
right,
more and you generate more. That was fair. The
yeah.
problem is it got really, really, really
It,
dirty because people were getting
yeah,
abused, and then you had people with real foul intentions that got involved, and that's how these things always work. Cody, that whoever was an agent who was getting fouled during the NIL era is going to sit there right now as we're
yeah,
speaking, thinking, "How can I get fouled during the rev share era?" So like they're going to find
exactly.
cracks
Yes,
to try to make
and that's
this crappy again. Yeah.
absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Like Rift Share is going to be awesome the first 2 years, right? But and not to go off on a big tangent, but like the NCAA, they just don't have the power to do it. So I don't know. Something's got to change.
The whole CFP
I,
shows you how the NCAA
I
has no authority. It's not even an
my
NCAA
deep,
title, really.
my deep hope. I hope it works out perfect. I hope we do rev share and it's perfect and it causes no issues and it makes everything better. But I live in the real world.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But
Yeah.
but like I said earlier, bottom line, no matter which version of the rev share plan, it's better than NIL. So at least we've taken that step. We'll see how people abuse rev share, and we'll have to take that next step in a few years from now, more likely than not.
Yeah, and I also will put out there for anybody that's concerned about the non-revenue sports to make this fair, at least from a West Virginia perspective, because not everyone maybe is aware of what goes on with donors. Granted, this was public knowledge. The women's basketball program this past calendar year, this athletic year, received a $2.5 million donation to the program. And that money was just to women's basketball. It was not to football. It was not to men's basketball. It was not to the overall athletic program. It was not to Ren Baker's pocket, for anyone who believes that. It was not to help out rowing or whatever. No, it was not about this political debate here. It was to women's basketball. So my call is, Cody, maybe we're not rolling like that, but if you are a high roller and you're Ken Kendrick, and you, for example, are on the other side of the coin politically than what's now in there, and you don't like what Trump is doing, you can get in your pocket and throw money at a women's sport and say it got to go there. You have that power to do so. That can happen. And they would be forced to put it there. And the women's basketball program is flourishing as a national contender, and they are fine financially. And you could argue, and this would be the other part of it, do they need $2.5 million if the men's program is getting only 3.5 in NIL? I mean, that almost seems like that's not actually fairly balanced to what is needed. There's a lot more money that's needed to sustain the football program than it is women's basketball. You need money, but do you need, think of 105 scholarship players, Cody. You need more money than the women's team needs. You just do. So that's a lot of money that went to a women's basketball program. A lot of money. So, you could say, here's a check.
I might roll like that.
Well, maybe you do, but then maybe I command you to start up the softball program and no longer have to wait for Iowa State in that allegiance. If you're high rolling, Cody, then I command you to fund rowing, fund tennis.
I'd love to see softball here.
Yeah. But the Cyclone Ears was a thing because there's not, and they don't have baseball, which is weird as well.
No, that's wild.
That's wild. That's a Power 4. So that was a whole thing there. And as cool as that was, both of these programs should be fixing that. That should be the first order. And who knows if that's not in Rand's mind? Because again, he was kind of on the tail end, and he is somebody that has that forward thinking. He was building a baseball stadium in North Texas before they even had a team. So he was trying to do that. You just don't know. But that should be noted that the women's basketball program received a lot in a single donation in a lump sum, or however that's matriculated, but that was the donation. And, just ask Neil Brown, that those checks were not getting written for the football program. So at least not this last year. So the programs that need the more money are going to get more money, and I don't know how you wouldn't have been broke in the old model, I guess, is my overlying point. But is it fair? No. We'll also see what, continues to be forever, Cody, too, because, it's 3 months we're changing policies here. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be changing presidents next week, but
don't jinx it.
Some might want that, but I mean, you only have, he doesn't have a third term if you want Trump out of there, but who knows who will be after, and then who knows if everything Trump's trying to do won't get scrapped again with executive orders, and then we'll go back to what it was. But at that point, Cody, will be several years into this rev share model, and at that point we'll be sitting here saying, yeah, it worked for a while, but now it doesn't work, and now we got to change it, and now maybe we have the power because maybe there's somebody else in office, whereas before it, NIL has been around longer than people think, and obviously money was getting exchanged hands illegally for a very, very long time as well. But wanting to bring all that up because that was news today that kind of, I do think, went under the radar a little bit because the breaking news was just in the Title IX release, like politically and from the government. But it definitely affects college sports in particular, and it would have been interesting. I actually would have wondered how, just a little bit how it was going to work before, because my only thing that maybe my analysis is wrong is during the time frame of the old policy, we were sitting there and Ren Baker was very confident in the program still being able to be successful in the coming years with rev share. But he's a money guy, so you would have thought he would have been concerned how you don't go broke if you have to share it and trickle it down that much. He wasn't as concerned as it seems like that would have been the case, but we will see. It's a gigantic big deal, and we will see how that continues on. But as an underrated thing, and now there's even more pressure, Cody. As we kind of wrap up this live, we've been talking a lot about, well, okay, here's the pressure. To year one with Rich Rod, everybody kind of got what they wanted, and him coming back. He's going to be on McAfee every week. McAfee's talking about righting wrongs. People are mentioning national title. You got a new, system in place of Title IX. You don't got to trickle anything down. If you're McAfee, you can write a check for $10 million and say it's all to football and doesn't matter what happens with the women's sports, and you don't have to bat an eye, worry about any lawyers coming after you during all that. You play Pitt on 13-9. You got 10 power fours instead of the 11 that Brown was dealing with. Week 1 is against an FCS, not a power 4. Boy. I mean, a lot of it is just written for you to be good. A lot of pressure there to be good. Can you imagine all of this in place? It's almost like the world is trying to help out Rich Rod. Every news is we're trying to help out Rich Rod. So there's pressure that if we're sitting here a year from now and it's a 5 and 7 year, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to want to hear Ren Baker's press conference saying that was just year 1. We now have this new, rev share in place for a year. We'll be good for the future. It's like, I don't know. I mean, a lot of comments were made about getting this started earlier, and I don't think anyone's going to want to deal with 3-8 like it was in Rich Rod's first season 20 plus years ago. But that'll do it for this one to react to the Pat White news. And he is back with West Virginia. Be very, very curious on how all of that works. And, my little thought, too, and I imagine this is the case, his title absolutely could allow them to have him do 0 press conferences all year. I mean, assistant QB coach,
yeah.
If they're not going to retire the number, they don't have to ever give him to us. That is not like I mean, Rhett's going to have to do one. The QB coach would normally do one. His assistant, special assistant to the head coach, when has that press conference existed? Maybe they'll handle it differently for Pat White, but they could easily just walk in silence and just be dropping tweets and just keeping it moving if they want to. It definitely could be the case.
Yeah. Yeah.